We're up to Daf Tzadi Ches Omid Beis, and we're up to Tanura Bonon. If you count down from the top, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 7 lines down from the top. We learned in a brisa, Asara Shulchanos, the pasuk indicates that Asa Shlomo HaMelech, when Shlomo HaMelech built the first Beis Hamikdash, he had 10 Shulchanos. Shenemar, because the pasuk tells us in Divrei Yomim Beis, Vayas Shulchanos Asara. He made 10 tables. Now it says, Vayanach, where did he place these tables? By Heichal. Right, the Heichal is the Kodesh, where the Shulchan was, right outside the Kodesh Kadoshim. Chamisha miyamin, v'chamisha mismol. Now, if we take this pasuk literally, he put 5 tables on the right side as you enter into the Heichal, and you're coming in to the Heichal from west to east. 5 tables on the left side, and if we take this pasuk literally, we're talking about entering into the Heichal. The Tomer, if we take it literally, Chamisha miyamin haPesach, v'chamisha mismol haPesach. Now we have a problem. Why? The Torah is going to tell us that the Shulchan has to be located in the north. But if we take this pasuk literally, it became Matzinish Shulchan Bidarom, because when you're coming in with north and south, so that when you turn left, like for example, it says here in the pasuk, Chamisha mismol, so then turning left of the entrance, you're going to be turning south. Vatorah Amra, the Torah tells us, and this is a pasuk in Shmos Perek Chavav, Vashulchan titein al tzelat tzafon. Shulchan has to be on the north side, not on the south side. So how do we interpret this pasuk in Divrei Yomim? And where exactly did Shlomo HaMelech locate these 2 sets of 5 tables each? So again, we have to emphasize that the Pesach of the Heichal was on the east, and then if let's say you're facing the Heichal, then turning left would be towards the south, and the Shulchan has to be on the north. So now the Gemara is going to reinterpret the pasuk. Ella, but rather, Shlomo HaMelech built 11 tables. Well, that's not exactly true. The pasuk says he built 10 tables, but there are 11 tables. There's one table that was built by Moshe Rabbeinu back at the time of the Mishkan, and they still held on to that table. And the description of 5 tables on the right and 5 tables on the left describes the tables sort of like around a center point. What was that hub? What was in the middle? Shel Moshe Ba'emtza. Right, to give deference to the Shulchan, the original Shulchan in the Mishkan of Moshe Rabbeinu, they put it in the middle. And then, when it says 5 miyamin, 5 mispol, that's all in relationship to that table that's in the middle. Chamisha miyamino, 5 tables, not on the yamin of the Pesach, the way we initially interpreted it, but to the right side of Moshe Rabbeinu's Shulchan, v'chamisha b'smolov, on the left side. So that's what the Torah means when the pasuk says to the right and to the left, we're not talking about to the right and the left of the Pesach, but rather to the right and the left of the Shulchan of Moshe Rabbeinu. Now let's just add the following, as Rashi points out here, that the Shulchan of Moshe had to be in the Tzafon, so it was located in the Tzafon of the Heichal. So when you have 5 tables from Shlomo Melech on the right side, and then 5 tables on the left side, they were all in the Tzafon. Tana Rabbana, we learned to the Brisa, Eser menorahs asa Shlomo. Shlomo made 10 menorahs. And again, there were 11 menorahs in the first Beis HaMikdash, because they also had the menorah from the Mishkan. Shenemar, and once again, we're back to Divrei Yomim, and the pasuk says, "Vayas es menoros hazahav eser." He made 10 golden menorahs. Now, where were these menorahs located? Obviously, the menorah, like the shulchan, has to be in the heichal. But where in the heichal? It's supposed to be in the south of the heichal, and it says, "Vayitein ba'heichal chamesh miyamin v'chamesh mismol." And once again, if we take this literally, it means when you enter into the heichal, you turn right and you have 5 menorahs. You turn left from the Pesach, and you have another 5 menorahs. Min ha-Pesach, v'chamish mismol ha-Pesach, mikein, matzinu menorah bat safon. And you're going to end up with the menorah, because again, if you're turning towards the right side of the Pesach of the Heichal, the right side, as we said before, you're going into the Heichal west-east. The right side is going to be north and the left side south. So now it turns out that 5 out of 10 menorahs were in the north side when you turn right. Im kematzinu menorah b'tzafon v'torah omra ves ha-menorah nochach ha-shulchan. Now, the Gemara is only quoting part of the pasuk. If you take a look in the Torah, or he quotes the whole pasuk, which is in Shmos Chavav pasuk Lamed Hey. Just let me find it for a second. Yeah, here it is. It's number Dalid in the Torah, or V'samtas hashulchan michutz haparochus ha-menorah noch hashulchan al tzel ha-mishkan teimona. And the word teimona means to the south. And then the pasuk goes on to say, "Vashulchan titel al tzelat tzafon." As we saw earlier, the shulchan has to be in the north. So therefore, we have to again reinterpret, because it can't be that the 5 menorahs were placed in the north when you come in and you turn to the right of the Pesach, because the menorah has to be in the south. That's why, by the way, it has nothing to do with our sugya, that when we light the Chanukah menorah in the Beis HaKnesses, we have to light it in the south side of the Beis HaKnesses. In any event, the Gemara now reinterprets the pasuk. Ella shel Moshe be'emtza. The point of reference is not the Pesach of the Heichal, but rather Moshe Rabbeinu's menorah, which was placed in the middle, with chamisha miyamino, chamisha mismol, but they were all located in the south side of the Heichal. Now we have another brisa, and in fact, we have 2 brisas that seem to contradict one or the other. Tani Chad, in one brisa it says, Mechatzi bayis v'lifnim hayu munachim, that the shulchanos were located from the halfway point of the Heichal inward. So you come into the Pesach of the Heichal. Now, we have to keep in mind that the total area, including the Kodesh Kadoshim and the Heichal, is 60 Amma. So according to one brisa, it would seem that they put the shulchanos inside the Heichal, but from the middle, which would be 30 amos, inside, let's say 31 amos. But Tani Chada, another brisa says, Mishlish habayis v'lefnim hayu menachim, that they placed it 1/3 in, which would be only 20 amos, not, as we said before, 31 amos. Slow cash. It all depends on how you calculate this entire area. Are you calculating with the Kodesh Kodashim or without the Kodesh Kodashim? Mar kachashiv beis Kodesh Kodashim b'hadei heichal. And Mar lo kachashiv beis Kodesh Kodashim b'hadei heichal. So as we said before, the total area of the heichal was 60 amos. This we know from a pasuk in Malachim that describes the Bais Asher Bona Melech Shlomo Hashem Shishim Amma, and that Shishim Amma is referring to the entire structure of the Heichal, including the Kodesh Kadoshim. So now, if you're going from west to east, because the Kodesh Kadoshim is on the west, so you go 20 amos, meaning the Kodesh Kadoshim out of the total 60 amos of the Heichal took up 20 out of 60. So therefore the midway point is going to be 30. Right? So let's go over this. You have if your perspective is from the Heichal, and now you want to get halfway through just one second. If you're going to go with the Heichal, including the Kodesh Kadoshim, then you go 20, and then you're left with 40. Correct? Right? The balance of the Heichal is going to be 40 Amma. With the Heichal, with the Kodesh Kadoshim, it's all told 20 plus 40 is 60. So therefore, when you go from the west, which is where the Kodesh Kadoshim is, moving towards the east, the halfway point, which is the first brisa that says Michatzi Bayis V'Lifnim, so that's going to be halfway beyond the Kodesh Kadoshim, which is halfway of 40 amos, of the remaining 40 amos. So basically, there's no machlokas here, but the question is, what do you consider the halfway point? Is it 20 of 40? Or is it 20 of 60? Either way, whether it's 20 of 40 or 20 of 60, you're at the same point. The only question is whether it's a third or whether it's half. So these two brises can be reconciled. You have to place the shulchan inwards to that point, which is the 20 amma line. But how do you describe that 20 amos? If you're describing the 20 amos relative to the whole 60 amos structure, including the Kodesh Kadoshim, then it's 20 over 60 is 1/3. The other brisa is focused totally on the 40 amos beyond the Kodesh Kadoshim, pure Heichal, and 20 to reach that 40 amma point, you go 20 amos, which is half of the 40, because you're not calculating the 20 of the Kodesh Kadoshim. The Gemara now says the following. Tana Rabbana, we learned in the Brayso, Mizrach u'marav hayu munachim. This already we discussed earlier with regard to Kalim in the Beis HaMikdash, what direction were they facing? And we first have the opinion of Rebbe that it's mizrach u'mayrav, from east to west, meaning moving towards the Lifnei Hashem, which is in the west. However, Rabbi Eliezer, Reb Shimon disagrees, and he says that the shulchan has to go mitzafon l'darom, from the north to the south. And that's against our Mishnah. Our Mishnah doesn't even quote Rabbi Eliezer, but the Brayso quotes Rabbi Eliezer. My time of the Rebbe. Now, we have to keep in mind that you can set up two possible analogies when you're trying to figure out where the shulchan was. You can either compare it to the Aron Kodesh or to the menorah. Is Rebbe's going to say Gomer menorah? We're going to create an analogy between the shulchan and the menorah. Ma menorah mi mizrach lemarav. Again, even though the menorah was in the south side, but nevertheless it was situated from east to west. So you had an east-west line, and you had 6 branches or lamps towards the east. I'm sorry, 3 of the 6 towards the east, another 3 of the 6 towards the west, with the Ner Maravi right in the middle. So again, your line now, we have to remember this, is a line that goes from east to west. Afhani and the Shulchanos Nami also mean Mizrach Umarav. So now the Gemara asks the obvious question: Menorah Gufa Minol. How do you know that the menorah was going from east to west? And the answer is Midechsiv B'ner Maravi, with regard to the westernmost lamp. Yaroch also Aaron Lifnei Hashem. Right, because the Kodesh Kadoshim we said is in the west, where the Shechina is. Michlal Dekulu Lav Lifnei Hashem. Only that one particular ner was in the Marav, in front of Hashem. The others, meaning the other 6, were not Lifnei Hashem. They were moved away from the Kodesh Kadoshim. Now, for Isal Kedaitach Safon L'Dorom, if you're going to interpret that the menorah was in a north-south line, then Kulu Nami Lifnei Hashem. Why would you single out the Ner Maravi as Lifnei Hashem? On the north to south line, they're all equidistant from the Kodesh Kadosha, which is Lifnei Hashem. Unless we use a different line, and that is the east and west line. Now we go to the Shita Rabbi Elazar, Reb Shimon, my timer, Garma mi Aron. Right, he would rather compare the Shulchanos to the Aron. Ma Aron Sofo L'Dorom, which I believe is in the Brisa that we had yesterday, and Afhani, these two, meaning the Shulchanos, have to be Mitzofel L'Dorom. Frek the Gemara for Rebbe Nami Ligmar Mi Aron. Why does Rebbe choose Dafka to compare the Shulchanos to the menorah with an east-west line, forfeiting a possible analogy to the Aron, like Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon, with the Aron on the north-south line? And the answer is Donin Chutz Mi Chutz Ve'ein Donin Chutz Mi Pnim. So both the Shulchanos and the menorah were located outside the Kodesh Kodashim in the Heichal, whereas the Aron was located inside the Kodesh Kodashim. That's called Bifnim. Reb Elazar Reb Shimon Ligmar Menorah. Why does he choose to compare it to Aron? Amalecha, Reb Shimon says, Menorah Gufe Tzafon V'Darim Hava Mancha. So right now, the Gemara postulates that Rebbe Elazar rejects a comparison between the Shulchanos and the Menorah, and he holds that the Shulchanos, like the Aron, have to be mitzofim l'darom, because basically he's telling you that even the menorah has to be tzofim l'darom. Now, what does that mean? The menorah has to be tzofim l'darom. D'chsiv yarach oso Aaron ubanov, meaning oso is referring to the Ner HaMaravi. So how can you tell me, Rebbe Elazar, that the menorah was tzofim l'darom? The menorah would have to be from Myrov to Mizrah. Let's go the other way around, from Mizrah to Myrov. In order to set up the Ner HaMaravi on the western side. So how can he tell me that the menorah was going from north to south? So I can almost guess the Gemara's answer, the mitzadei lehu atzdude. In other words, even though it seems from the pasuk that only one ner was lifnei Hashem on the west, and now Rabbi Elazar is saying that the menorah was tzafon v'darom, what he's going to say is mitzadei lehu atzdude, that the lamps were bent over towards the center, which is the Ner Maravi. The Ner Maravi itself would bend towards the Kodesh Kodashim. So again, the other Neros were Tzafon V'Darom, and this one was Maravi. So when the pasuk seems to indicate that the Ner Maravi was different than the other Neros, and that was the one that was Myrov, that's because on the north-south line, the Ner Maravi turned towards the Myrov. So, right, the menorah is going Safon Darom, but the middle Ner is pointed towards the Myrov, and that's why it's called the Ner Maravi. But the other Neros are pointing towards the Ner Maravi, they're bent towards that, and that's Safon Ludoro. Tisanya, we learned in the Brisa, El Mul Pnei HaMenorah Ya'iru Shiva Sad Neros, by pasuk at the beginning of Parshas Baloscha. Malabe, it teaches us, Shahayu Mitzadnim Pneim Kapi Ner Maravi. So this is, I guess, one of the miracles in the Mikdash, that the other Neros bent over towards the Ner Maravi. The Ner Maravi itself was bent over towards the west, towards the Kodesh Kodashim. Om Rabbi Nosson, Mikansha Emtza Meshubach. Right? If everything is turned towards the middle one, it means the middle one is superior. Like, for example, what does it mean we put the superior one in the middle? So he gives one example, but I wanted to give my example first. If you have three people walking, and one of them is the Chacham, he's the scholar, then the scholar should be flanked by one person on his right and one on his left. He's in the middle. Or, for example, the Kohen Gadol was flanked on one side by the Skan Kohen Gadol and on the other side from the other Skan on two sides. He has a different sugya in Masechta Megillah that on Yom Sheni, Yom Chamishi, we read a minimum, the Gemara says, of 10 psukim in the Torah. And the first Olah, right? Because when you have 10 psukim and you have three Olim, then you're going to, and each Olah has to get a minimum of three psukim. So you can have three. You can't have a third, because then you don't have 10. So somebody is going to call up for the fourth pasuk. And the halacha is, says the Gemara Megillah, the first Olah gets three, second Olah gets four, and the third Olah gets three. So that's called Emtsoi Meshubach. Okay, now the Gemara is going to ask one kasha after the other on Rabbi Loza, that the tables were going from Safon to Durham. Now, there's the Havamid of this sugya, and then the Gemara is going to change its mind. So in the Havamid of the sugya, if you had a diagram, all the tables are set up, right, 5 and 5, in a straight line. Is Bishlei Milaman Diyomer Mizrach Mav, according to Rebbe, who holds that the tables went from the east to the west, then everything works out in terms of the spacing of the tables. Hainu Dahavi Yisive Asar Be'esrim. Right, we know now that the shulchanos were placed at that point, the 20 amma point, which is inward of the Heichal's halfway mark. And according to Rebbe, we're talking about going from east to west. So basically, we're putting the shulchanos in the western 20 amos of the Heichal. Now, each table was 2 amos. And if we're assuming the tables were placed one next to the other, then a row of 10 tables would take up the entire space from, right, 10 times 2 is 20, from the entire east to west. So that would mean that the first 5 tables of Shlomo were placed end to end from the Ma'arav, and the second 5 tables end to end from the Mizrach. So you have a line of tables, 20 amos, 2 times 10, 20 amos, extending from the west till the halfway mark of the Heichal. Now, you could fit together 10 shulchanos so tightly, one attached to the other, that there's no space between them because you're taking up the entire 20 amos. So the row of shulchanos extended a little bit further than 20 amos. The 10th shulchan reached slightly beyond, as we called it, 20.1 or 20.5, the halfway mark. But now the Gemara is going to ask a kasha on Rabbi Elazar Reb Shimon. If we're talking about the line from north to south, which means that shulchanos go from one wall to the other wall. Esrim bi-esrim hechi aviyasvi. How is it possible to have 2 amma shulchanos, 10 of them, and they're situated precisely 20 amos of space. If the tables are placed north to south, which is the opinion of Rebbe Lazar, their length follows the width of the Heichal, which is only 20 amos. It's impossible to avoid leaving a small amount of space between the shulchanos. But in this case, since there's a wall at each end of the row of shulchanos, there is not the slightest leeway at all to accommodate the extra space. We've got to squeeze a row of 10 2-amma tables into precisely 20 amos of space. And this cannot be done. It's just physically impossible. That's kasha number one. Now we have another 3 kashas. Visu, and furthermore, second kasha, Kohanim Hechi Avi Aili. Right? The tables are placed north to south, from wall to wall. How could the Kohanim pass through the Heichal? And Visu, in the third kasha, is Matzinu Chamish Shulchanos B'Darom. The Torah says that the Shulchanos have to be in the Tzafon. And now it comes out that if you're on a line like Reb Elazar Reb Shimon from north to south, then 5 out of the 10 are going to be in the southern side of the Heichal. That's impossible. Fourth kasha. Visu Shulchan de Moshe Heichi Monachle. Right, if you're going from north to south, and therefore the 10 tables, 10 times 2 amos of Shlomo took up all 20 amos of the width of the Heichal, there's no room for the Shulchan of Moshe. The Gemara points out that the last kasha is shver even according to Rebbe, Ulutaymech, and even if you want to go like Rebbe, L'mad Yomar, Mizrach, Umarav, Nami, we still have a kasha based on that last kasha of Shulchan de Moshe Heichen Avi Monachle, because the row of Shulchanos, even according to Rebbe, who's going from west to east, would take up the entire 20 amma area from the wall of the Kodesh Kodashim to the halfway mark of the Heichal. So there's no room for the Shulchan of Moshe, and therefore the Gemara now comes to the maskana that it's not the way we thought, that all the tables were attached one next to the other, 5 and another 5, all 10, taking up the entire area. Ella misavris chadora havi, are they all in one line? No. Trey dori ninu. There was a row of 5 tables, another row of 5 tables, and in the middle was the Shulchan of Moshe Rabbeinu. And this answers all the kashas. If, as the Gemara's maskana is, the 10 tables of Shlomo Melech were divided into 5 in one row and 5 in another row, so we place 5 tables from end to end in the first row. Then, in the middle, below, we're going to put the table of Moshe Rabbeinu. It's going to be in the length parallel to the 5 tables. And then below the tables, the table of Moshe Rabbeinu, we have a second row of 5 tables, and that goes from end to end. So Moshe Rabbeinu's shulchan was between 2 rows of Shlomo Melech's 5 and 5 shulchanos. So therefore there was plenty of room for the shulchan of Moshe Rabbeinu. You didn't have to fit 10 2-amma tables precisely in a space of 20 amos. There was room for the Kohanim to pass through, and there were no tables at all in the southern side of the Heichal.